Continuing our weekly Zera Shimshon Shir. This week is Parshat Matot Masei, so that way we are in line, so that Sefer Devarim always starts on the week before Tisha B'Av. And so we actually did this, the Torah that we're going to do. I looked back last year, and I gave the Shir this and Matot Masei last year also. Matot, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
So we're going to do one of the Shir, one of the classes, one of the lessons we're going to do is going to be the same one because I think it was just so good, and I really like it. I just find it's just a really impressive way to see how the Zera Shimshon thinks and how he kind of looks at things. And then the other one we're going to do is one that's new that we didn't do last year. And I think it's also a nice way to, last year, if I recall correctly, Matot and Masei were separate, we're not together. So that's why we didn't do it last year. That's that. May the learning that we do and the zchut of Zera Shimshon protect all our chayalim and all the people that need protection. And Bezrat Hashem, we should hear good news.
Amen.
Hear good news, Bezrat Hashem, on all fronts, personal, countrywide, professional, everything.
Amen. This is going to make sure everybody's sponsored as well.
Yes.
Dov, Harry.
Okay. So we're doing Drush Dalid in Parshat Masei. First of all, I want to say a funny story. There was someone was sending around a couple of years ago. They were sending around a grave. I don't we're not starting on a grave, but there was a woman on a grave. It said her name in English is Molly, and her Hebrew name is Matot Masei.
No way.
So first, what's the first thing you think? You think it's like some guy played around with Photoshop and did it around. Apparently, the guy, there's a person I know who did some research, and he found out that the grandson of this person, this woman, verifies the fact that her name was Matot Masei. What happened? She was born on Parshat Matot Masei, July 15th, so it's not that far off from when we are. She was born on that weekend. Apparently, her parents were having trouble having difficulty having children. So the Rav or Rebbe, they're not sure who, told them that they should name it after the Parshat, which used to be common, name after the Parshat, after Shabbos, Hag, whatever. And so she was born on Parshat Matot Masei. There's not a lot of female names in that one, so they named her Matot Masei. At first, they thought it was a mistake that the father, in the olden days, the father would write down the Parshat that the child was born, and then they didn't use the name. Over the time, they didn't use the Hebrew name, so they just wrote it in the book, and then the grandchildren looking, they find the book, they see that so that's what they did. But actually,
they were probably vultures.
But it ended up being that their great grandson of this woman, Molly, is actually a frum guy, and many of their great grandchildren are from. Anyway, just thought it's just a funny thing. So what we're going to start with is a lesson about Moshe Rabbeinu, Midian, his fight with Midian. That happens in this week's Parshat, and it's Parshat Matot. And then we're going to move on to something from Parshat Masei. So in Parshat Matot, the pasuk it says, "Achar te'asef elamecha." It says Hashem tells Moshe that you have to fight Midian, and then after you fight Midian, you're going to then pass away. So the Midrash starts, and it's typical with the Zera Shimshon. He starts with the Midrash. He says, "Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, im ata rotzeh lichyot shanim harbei, lo yiru Yisrael nekama bo'ovehem, v'lo tikavesh Midian lifnehem." He says, Hashem says, it's like a dialogue between Moshe and Hashem, or Hashem and Moshe more correctly. He says, if you want to live longer, no problem, but Bnei Yisrael will never see the revenge that they're supposed to take onto other nations around them. But, and he says, and Midian won't get conquered as I promised. Miyad amar Moshe, mutav shetikavesh Midian lifnehem, v'yiru Yisrael mapala b'sonehem. Even though Moshe knew that what the implications are of him fighting and conquering Midian, he said, I'd rather Bnei Yisrael conquer Midian than not, and that Bnei Yisrael should see the falling of their enemies, meaning the conquering of their enemies, apropos to what's going on in the recent times. And he said, better that Midian gets captured by him in front of Bnei Yisrael's eyes, even though I know that if I do that, that means that I'm going to pass away faster. That's the conversation, that's the Midrash. So the first question the Zera Shimshon asks is Yeshudaktek Ma'inyan Moshe im Milchemet Midyan. What's the connection between Moshe and Midyan, the Milchama Midyan? Other than that Hashem told him you have to fight, there's no real connection. And he says that's the first question, and he's going to go through a few conversations, and then he shows something that I still, even though I remembered it from last year, only because I was so impressed at the style and the format of what the Zera Shimshon does in terms of understanding of all these different, Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod. He just is able to kind of bring it all together in this nice Dvar Torah. So he says here, "V'yesh lo shekatvu mekubalim." The mekubalim. This is Gali Raza. This is the name of a book, a Kabbalistic book, written by the student of the Arizal. And he says, "Shekol melech osar sheba la'asot nekama be'ezu umah." Any king or ruler that's coming to take revenge upon any nation, tzarich sheyeh lo izu chibur b'kishur im otam umah. He says that you have to have some sort of connection. There has to be a relationship between, now relationship doesn't mean literally relationship, but there has to be some sort of connection between the ruler and the nation that he's about to seek revenge on. Like, for example, as he says, he brings the first example, he says, Kigon Pinchas sheba mi benot Putiel. In last week's Parsha, and the week before that, we know that it says Pinchas came from the daughters of Putiel. Putiel was Yitro, right? He was a descendant from Yitro, and he what did he do? His job was to do Nekama and Midyan. His job was to do Nekama. He took Nekama. How did he do it? He killed the Midyanit who Kazbi Batsur. He killed the Nasi of Shevet Rishimon and the woman that committed the sin. So somehow, what was the connection between Pinchas and Midyan? Pinchas came from, or was a grandson of Midyan. According to the Midrash, he was a grandson of Yitro, and therefore he was, how does it go? He was the grandson. He was a descendant from one of the daughters of Putiel, which is Yitro, which is similar to Moshe, meaning that Moshe was married to one of the daughters, and then another daughter married Pinchas's father. Okay, Pinchas's father and mother were also one of the children of Yitro, and that's one of the. Rashi in last week's parsha quotes the midrash that says that Putiel could be one of two things: either that his job was that Putiel means that his father's job or grandfather's job was to kind of fatten up the cows of Zara, or his job was that he came from Putiel, from Yitro itself. We're just starting to Jewish study. We are lacking some books this week. For some reason, there was a miscommunication here. Anyway, so David Sheba Miruta Movias Hanikam Moab, and then you go to David, and if you look at David, well, of course we know that David comes from Ruth, from Moab. And what did David do? David takes revenge from Moab. So we have that the Midrash says that Moshe and Hashem had a conversation. Hashem tells Moshe, if you don't want to take revenge on the nation, that is on the nation right now, you can extend your life, meaning you can live longer. Or it says, because right, so he says, Hashem. So the pasuk is that basically Hashem is telling him, you have to win this war, and then you're going to die. So Hashem, the Midrash says, Hashem says, listen, you don't want to die right now, no problem. Don't fight the war, right? You can extend.
Rashi says you have to then the people didn't want to, and he had to lechaletz otam.
So that was not the Rashi. That's not mentioned here. But what Moshe says is, I'd rather that Bnei Israel see the enemy, the revenge of their enemy in their eyes, meaning they see it personally, like I mentioned, apropos for what we're seeing in our own eyes, right? Better than that, and I know that the implication of that means that I'm not going to live very long. And then the Zera Shimshon asks the question: what is the connection between Moshe and Midyan? So the answer is that he starts with a quote from the name of the sefer is called Gali Razia, which is the sefer of a student of the Rizal, and he says that every king or leader who wants to take revenge on a certain nation, it has to be that they have some sort of relationship or connection between the two. So Pinchas came from Benot Putiel, as you said. Putiel is probably Yitro, so he did revenge with Midyan with last week's parsha. Then he said David comes from Ruth, and Ruth was from Moab, and David took revenge on Moab. Then he says Yoshua Shaya Mizer Yosef Shenitkadel B'Veit Potifar vayati liot chotno shel sitra achra, shelakach Rachav hazona v'yodad zot, asa milchama b'Amalek. Yoshua, interestingly enough, was from the descendants of Yosef, and Yosef grew up in Potiphar's house, as we know, and he was going to be, what does that mean here? He says, right, exactly, and then he says, and who did Yoshua marry? Rachav Hazonah, right? And who did Yoshua take revenge on? Amalek, right? So so Yoshua took the Amalek is obviously the Sitra Achra, and so therefore we have Amalek and Bilam and Gematria b'Mitzrayim, ki Mitzrayim ba'ad Bilam b'koach Amalek, yitin yitzah leParo, shlosha shayu b'oto yitzah, v'chan yavo Amalek v'chan ba, Amruzal sheba mi'etzel Bilam Arsha, the famous midrash that says that Bilam and Amalek were gave the advice to Mitzrayim. That's the famous midrash in Shemot mentions it, and it says Vayavo Amalek when it talks about Vayavo Amalek. Who came? Vayavo Amalek. He says that he came from the conversation that Amalek came from the conversation or the advice of Bilam Harasha, and Bilam and Amalek were together with. If you look at the gematria, they actually work out the gematria of Amalek and Mitzrayim. Amalek and Bilam equals B'Mitzrayim. So anyway, so Amalek hu rosh l'klipot, she'achar she'kavshu sichon v'og, hayal lem likanes eretz Yisrael, k'div reshit goyim Amalek. So basically what we see here is that the relationship between Yehoshua, who is the one who is commanded to take revenge on Amalek, and the relationship between Yehoshua and Amalek is that Yehoshua comes from the descendant of Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef HaTzadik was, overcame the Sitra Achra, right? And Yehoshua was able to take his job, his commandment from Moshe was to do is go take revenge on Amalek, which is therefore there you have a connection. Now, we still have this question is why we still have a question. We sort of understand that there's this connection that every ruler who wants to take revenge on a nation, you have to have some sort of relationship. So it kind of brings examples, saying there's a precedent. So now the question is, what's the relationship between Moshe and Midian? The obvious answer would probably be what? That Moshe, right, exactly. Moshe ran away, when he ran away from Paro, he ran to Midian. So he also married a Midianite woman. She's actually from Midian, or
that's why they say that Pinchas had to take
right.
revenge because there was
right.
talk about Moshe.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Right. So that's
a little stuck in that moment, right? Like to what to do, and it was just like
yeah, exactly. He wasn't unsure. In fact, I was just reading yesterday. The Chalban has a beautiful piece about the Chalban. He recently died. Rabbi Chaim Cohen. I think his last name.
He was called the Chalban
because he was a milkman. Yeah, he lived up north. He just died within the last 5 years. He has a very
Talmud of Rav Kook's.
Yeah. So he has this wonderful piece how he says that.
Holy.
Yeah. So he anyway, so he has a wonderful piece, and he says that the reason, if you look at throughout from the beginning of Shemot till now, we never find that Moshe is perplexed with the halacha. He always seems to know what's going on. All of a sudden, he gets to Pinchas. He can't understand he doesn't know what to do with Pinchas and this whole situation with Pinchas. He doesn't know what to do with Bnot Slavchad.
And what about the Mekoshesh?
And the Mekoshesh, he wasn't sure, but that was anyway. So the Chalban says, based on the writings of Rav Kook, and I think also the Arizal, he mentions that basically this is the beginning of the transition of the generation of the Midbar, which everything was just given to them. So it's very clear that Moshe could just, straight from Hashem done. But now it's the generation of the Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. All of a sudden, things are not going to be natural. It's not going to come just you have to work for it. You have to ask questions. It's the difference between Torah Shebichtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. Anyway, so just a side note there. So we now ask the question. Zera Shimshon asked the question about tzrichim anu lemodai ma'u hatam shetzarich shezeh hamelech ha'asar yeh lo chibur. So he says we now understand that there is such an idea of having a connection, but he says I don't understand why we need to have a connection at all. Who cares? A king wants to take revenge. Who cares if he has a relationship or a connection to that nation or not? Why would I think? Why would I think? So this is it's a great question. That was a question that you kind of ask. You can ask on the midrash itself that we mentioned that he quotes from the beginning. So the reason, even though I looked last year in the videos, and I was actually asked by Charles last year to give a shiur around Matot Masei. And the reason why I want to do it again is because I love this piece, because I think it's a very unique style of learning, but also because I just like the way the Zera Shimshon just brings different things and connections. I always enjoy when people make a good relationship between different sources. So he's already brought a source of, let's call it, let's say, sod, by bringing something from the student of the Arizal. And he's also brought midrash, because he brings midrash all the time. And now he's going to bring halacha, and he's going to make the halacha kind of give you a sense of what's really going on here. So he says, V'yesh lomar, di'ita b'shulchan aruch, orach chaim simon kufnun daled. If you look in the Shulchan Aruch, he says there, Tashmishe kedusha kigon tikshel tefillin v'zuzot u'sfarim, yesh lem kedusha v'tzarich leganzan. So of course, he says is, you look at the Shulchan Aruch, what happens with the tashmish kedusha? Let's say the tik of tefillin, your tefillin bag, or your mezuzah, the case that's from the mezuzah, or a sefer. And sefer there means like the tik, like your sefer Torah, around the sefer Torah, or in a Megillah, you have the case of the Megillah. You have kedusha, and what do you have to do with them? You actually have to do is you have to, when you're done with the bag gets worn out. Your tefillin bag gets worn out. What do you have to do? You have to put it in gnizah. You can't just throw it out. Okay? So he says, if you look in the Ramah, writes there, where there's a Masei, he says, Darona banui bechoma. Let's say, and not in here we don't have it. In the old building we had it. In the niche, like you have a little niche in the wall, like right? You have a nook in the wall, and you put the aron like you see that picture there. So you have the picture is kind of recessed into the wall. Let's say you made the aron kodesh recessed into the wall, but it wasn't in a special case. You just put the sefer Torah into that, right, into the recessed wall. So now, if you put that into the recessed wall, what happens? The answer is that you don't have to take let's say the sefer Torah is no longer good. So the Sefer Torah has to obviously you have to put that in Geniza, but the Aron Kodesh itself doesn't have to you don't need Geniza for that. Why? Because it's meant what's going to happen to that wall no matter what we do. No matter what kind of water sealant or anything is going to happen. There's going to be water coming in, cracks are going to happen, things are going to happen. It doesn't have the Kedusha that a tefillin bag has or a...
Does it still have some... Or an external Aron Kodesh.
Right, exactly, right. It still has some sort of Kedusha.
I would feel like it's probably a bad idea to put like a flat screen there.
Right, exactly. No, it's not to put a flat screen there. I think it's more about what do you have to do with that space after.
Right, no, but I'm saying so after the fact.
Right, so after the fact, you probably have to do is you fill it up. You can't necessarily use it for just something else, but you don't have to. The kedusha doesn't. The level of kedusha is not the same as a tefillin bag or something like that. So he says, if you build an aron kodesh built into the wall, like recessed into there, right? If the books are going to naturally get worn out because of the weather from especially in the olden days. You have to remember the olden days, they didn't have the water sealants that we have nowadays. He says, "En bo kedusha u'perish hamagen Avram, delo chala alav kedusha meikara, delo mikra tashmish didei, ela mazik didei." He says that there's no kedusha at all. Whenever you build that wall, that you build that little hole, and you put the Aron Kodesh, if you put the Sefer Torah in there, it never has Kedusha. Even though it's holding the Sefer Torah, it never has Kedusha because that thing was designed for what? One thing. It's going to fall apart. The wall is going to fall apart at some point, whether it's water damage or cracks or something. So the Kedusha itself is never there. When you build an Aron Kodesh like this, sure, then it's built for that and it's designed for that, so it always can contain it. Now, so that's the little background. So already I like the fact that he's bringing something that's totally in left field, in my opinion. Like does not make, it's not connected to what we're talking about, but you're going to see that he does bring it. He says, and then he takes, after bringing halacha, which is obviously, let's call it Pshat and Drash, right? Pshat and Drash, right, exactly. Galui, let's call it right. Galui. He goes back to Nistar. He says, he quotes the Shara Apsukim, which is the Arizal, and he says that. So he says here, all the neshamot, all the different souls were stuck in some way in the klipot. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but let's just say that we sort of understand what it means. And he says here, "V'chen hu omer, mi yitain tahor mitameh kigon Avraham miterach, v'chen David haya b'Moav, matzati David avdi, echan metzati v'Sdom, v'chen Pinchas ba mibno Pilal." He says that every soul, every neshama that we have, exactly. Every neshama that we have, that we know of, we know that all the leaders of our generation, of our history, have come from some sort of like, let's call it impure, right? So right, impure, selected, right? And they kind of refined and stuff, like you said, right? Avram from Terach, David from Moab, Pinchas comes from Putiel, Yoshua comes from Yosef, as we said. And he said, "Mukhan lekabel Rachav azuna letashum chatzi gufo ditchar lo bilon nukva plag gufa." So he's saying that also Rachav, Yoshua, and Rachav have some sort of relationship there. Therefore, he says, "Im ken haya salka data shekmo shekodem hotzat nitzotzot hakdoshot min hakliplot lo utar lanu lasot milchama imota umma." Lo utar lanu lasot milchama imota umma. Right, just like we said that before the nitzotzot, the kedusha comes out, right? You would think that we are not allowed to take revenge on that nation. Right? Ammon and Moab, Moshe is not allowed to take revenge on them and fight them. Right? Who the two predot? The two predot are right. Ruth and Moavia and
Who was from Ammon.
and Naamah from Ammon. Right. So exactly Naamah. So you have these two people, these two special people that are supposed to come out. So meaning it wasn't time yet for the revenge to be taken on these two nations because we have to wait for that process to be refined. Okay? Okay, now he says, Kach lachar tzot ha'predot avot, yesh lomar she'asur la'asot imhem milchama, lefi she'na'asu k'mo aron vatik, nitzemtzei kedusha she'aya b'tocham, v'yesh lam din shel tashmish she'tunim gniza. So he says is until that nation is refined, until those nitzotzot come out, they have the kedusha. They have a din of a tashmish kedusha, right? Why? Because they're still holding these holy neshamas, right? So until those holy neshamas come out, you can't be gonez the nation because you have these two special. In the case of removed, then you could take them, right? So now he says, look this, Ela de mitzad acher. So he says, therefore, that these nations have the status of access. You know, they have like the tashmish kedusha status, and therefore, since they have the tashmish kedusha, you can't get rid of them until they get rid of them. So that until the kedusha comes out, extracted, right? Now he says, let's think about the other side. What does a good Rav or a good Lamdan do? A good Lamdan does is when he understands there's an argument, he has to look at the other side of the argument and say, but if you might think this, in order for me to make sure that my argument is nice and strong and tight, I look at both sides of the argument, and that's what he says here. You might say, You might say the opposite. You might say, wait a minute. What would we say is these holy sparks might get ruined inside if the longer they stay in the Aron, the longer they stay in this other nation. It's detrimental to them. So wait a minute. What are we going to do?
Wait, who's saying the other nation?
What?
The ADD kicked in.
Okay.
Who's saying the other
Who's saying the other
nation?
nations?
Who's staying in the other nation?
No, the Nitzotzei Kedusha, right?
Oh, so it's the sparks
Right.
are
So it's right. You would say right. The longer one side of the argument is as long as they're in there, we can't get rid of. We can't take war. We can't go to war on them. The other side of the argument is, wait a minute. The longer they stay there, the more potential is that they're going to get damaged.
Who's influencing whom?
So that's what he's going to get to in a second.
Meaning, if they're in there, maybe they're.
So he's going to get to that in a second, similar to that. So he says, like you said, here's his question is, he asks the same question. He says, is it possible that these nations are, like you said, is maybe they're not letting this potential come out. They're holding them down, right? So he says, but we can, who's to say that in fact that the klipa was actually damaging the spark? Maybe all it's doing is just holding on to it. It's just holding it. It's not doing anything, right? So it's a great. So he says that's the question. So he basically like this. So he. Right. So he says now he explains. So he says this is why it's necessary for the only person who can actually take revenge on these nations are the ones that are affiliated with the nation itself. Otherwise, what happens?
The descendants of those sparks are the ones
They take the revenge on it. Right, exactly. So he says, he says, only that descendant of that spark or whatever that klipa can actually do is what he knows the pain point. He knows what influences, doesn't influence, what can.
Like a sales call.
Exactly.
Pain points.
Right, exactly. If you know what it is, if you know what the pain point is, then you know how to attack it, right? That's the typical question is always, like when they tell you about counselors or for drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, they always take someone, a previous person who once was involved in addiction to be the person who can then help the next person, because why? It takes someone to know how to talk to them. Same kind
Also a
of
big
what? Yeah.
It helps them heal by giving to others.
Right, exactly. Right. So he says, V'hachi ita b'shulchan aruch. Oh, right. So he says, V'hachi ita b'shulchan aruch, shamazik mamon chavero. Oh, this is the, okay. So he says, there's actually a halacha. So he says, there's a halacha in shulchan aruch. Again, amazik mamon chavero. If someone damages, let's say someone damages your property, v'en yodua mahizek, hanizok nishma b'notel. So this is actually, he says, let's say we don't know, someone damages your property and you don't know the extent of the damage, right? So the damaged party swears to assert what damage he suffered, and he collects accordingly. He says, we don't know exactly how much is valued at. So I say is, so he says, the person the party that was damaged says that there was damage he suffered, and he collects based on the assessment that he makes. Okay. Now he says, let's say, example, let's say I took a vessel that was closed from my friend, right, and he threw it into the water, or I threw it into a fire, right, so it's unsealed. Let's say I take a vessel from a friend, it's filled with precious jewels, right? And then I throw it, but what's the point? The point is that I take a vessel, I have no idea what's in it, I just take it and I throw it into the fire or into the water. But now the guy whose vessel it was originally says, oh, what did you just do? The vessel is worth nothing. But what happened? It's filled with pearls. So what is he can claim, even though we have no proof that there were actually pearls in there, he can claim that there were pearls in there, and he can get the money for that.
Wow.
Okay? He's believed. Right, so he says same thing with the holy nitzotzot that come from an impure nation are believed to assess the damage caused to them by the host nations. Meaning, he makes the relationship between this vessel that was filled with margalit, with precious pearls, similar to the nitzotzot that were stuck in this case. This wonderful shalom. Shalom. Anyway, so he says that it's similar in that nature. Let's say that's what he says. That how do we know that if this nitzot doesn't take wage war on the nation, then we know that's a siman that there was no damage to the nation. He says that therefore the Jewish people of that generation will not be able to take revenge on that nation because there actually it wasn't really impacted by it.
Takes one to know one.
Exactly. Therefore, it's considered like a proper case or cabinet of the aron. Right? If we look at the aron as a tashmish kedusha, as long as the tashmish kedusha doesn't necessarily damage the teak, what's inside, then as long as that means it's actually it's helping, right? What the whole case here that we have here is that the relationship between the tashmish kedusha, or let's say a not good sealed, well sealed tashmish kedusha, what impact it has on the nation and on what
Look in the wall.
right
is not really protecting the.
Exactly, and therefore, as long as why does the person who comes from a generation from a family or descendants of not so strong holy nitzotzot, why does that person like a Moshe, Yoshua, David, why do they have to be the ones to do it? Because they're the ones who are able to somehow get out and come out, and once they come out, so the rest of the nation is now susceptible to become what's yes, sir.
It's interesting that Moshe is not allowed to punish Nile.
Kanaj,
Nile.
the Nile.
Oh, the Nile.
Right.
So they say it wasn't.
And here he is explicitly supposed to go into war with a nation that let him in, gave him
So that's a good. So we're gonna get to a question that's not similar to that, but it has a similar tone to it in some way. So his question is, it's a good point, right? Because Rashi mentions several times that the Rashi mentions that in the Makot that Moshe couldn't administer the first, right? Because as Hakarata Tov to the first three Makot.
He should have a
Tov to the Midrash. Right, exactly. So
He was placed in the nine.
right.
By the way, Yitro almost joined our nation.
Right. So that's even more.
He did with him. He's like,
So yeah.
I could argue, just like Reuben is praised for saving Joseph,
Right.
while he seemingly did exactly opposite. He says,
Right.
just throw. Why? Because people have free will. Animals do only what Hashem said. So a
Right.
reaper does what Hashem said. It doesn't
Right.
decide to
Right.
be bad or good.
Right.
While Midyanim,
So we could say that maybe, again, this is just off the top of my head, that maybe we could say is that even though Yitro was a Kohen Midyan, he may not have been the most influential, meaning he had power, but he may be not the most influential, and therefore Midyan had like other rulers that were more,
we know that there were 5 kings.
right.
But wasn't he also like, Yisrael was like a little bit out of the, more of a nomad kind of thing?
It was. They were.
But, right,
All of them, or just him?
Midyanim. In
Oh,
fact-
all of them in general?
No, I'm saying the Midyanim, in fact, we're not wrapping up yet.
No.
The Midyanim, there's, the Midyanim that we're talking about now, they're like in the Shittim by the Dead Sea. The Midyan of Yitro, a lot of times, I think they're like closer to Eilat. They're like.
yeah, there must,
down south.
right,
Yeah, so like there's an entire eastern side of the Jordan River where the Midyanim were kind of nomads,
Interesting.
right?
yeah.
So then how really was there a kingship?
It was a
5
different, those are 5 different, tribes, right, exactly. So that would be my first answer, is that maybe Midyan,
on
even,
reservations.
right. So maybe Midyan was more like the actual nation of Midyan as opposed to Yitro itself, because also you could say is Moshe's father, you're going to attack the nation, his father-in-law, you're going to attack the nation as father. Some might say is that's the reason why he's attacking him. but anyway, so he says, right, no. Anyways, that was the Torah got smart not to talk about the mother-in-law.
I always tell my mother-in-law that there's one of these cactuses that's called the mother-in-law's throne. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
No.
Oh, the mother-in-law's tongue?
No, well, there's all kinds
Oh,
of them.
yeah?
There's one that's like.
The one that never dies.
It looks like a stool. It looks
Oh.
like a stool, and it's called Kiseh Chotenet.
No. Oh. Anyway, so he says like this. So now we have a very good question that none of us we should also ask the question is, if we have to take revenge on Midian, who should have been the ones who take revenge on Midian?
Oh.
Bnei Israel. Why?
Because
They were the ones who sinned. Exactly. So he says here, he says we should have thought of the question. He says that if regarding the war of Midian, we should have asked the question that Bnei Israel should be the ones taking revenge. Right? So he says here, right? And v'nasa isha sham. He says it's because Moshe grew up there and married Yitro's daughter. Moshe k'dei la'arot she'en lahem din tashmish kedusha. He says to prove Moshe, yes, Moshe married the daughter and married someone from Midian and grew up that they have no kedusha, right? And he says, right, V'im hayam mit Moshe mehem. Therefore, he says that's why Moshe has to be the one specifically to do it. Now we still have we've kind of made the connection between Moshe and Midian, and now he asks a question. He asks another kind of question about why the relationship between the Milchemet Midian and Moshe Rabbeinu in general. And the Aval Adayin Kasher L'Shon Midrash and Iskar Le'el De'amar She'im Moshe Haya Rotzeh L'Chiot Harbei, right? Lo Haya Efshar L'Yisrael L'Tol Nikvatam Ela Ad Samuch Mitato Shel Moshe V'Davar Tzirich Beyur Lama Zeh Aval Mazeh. So he said, actually, if you look in the next in Parshat Hazinu, he actually mentions, the next Drush, he actually mentions why Moshe had a measure of kind of relationship. He's asking now, he kind of mentions it. He says, I still don't understand why would Moshe want to not extend his life? Like it's still the question is like, as Hashem says, as long as you don't take revenge, you're going to live. So he still asked the question. He still has that question that doesn't really doesn't.
Before you check the answer, tell me.
Yeah. No, there is no answer. He doesn't mention. He says you have to look at the next midrash.
Like, if you, it's like a leader said, I can prolong my life, but the nation will go into Israel.
Right. So that's
I mean, there's an historic kind of, trajectory, right? After this happens, Mesa is supposed to go into the promised land. So, right, you could say, okay, I'll not fight the war, but that means that he's dooming the nation to like stroll in the desert until that's done.
right. So the way that's correct. The way he answers it in the next one, just looking at it quickly, he mentions what he's saying is when Hashem tells Moshe to take revenge for the people of for Nikom Mikmat Bnei Israel, and when Moshe tells the nation, tells Bnei Israel, he says Nikom, he says Nikom Mikmat Hashem. Right, what it says, he says Nikamat, he says, let me just make sure, Nikmat Hashem. So he's saying is that because what happened is that Moshe says is, it's not what Bnei Israel did, it's rather what the Midyanim did to Bnei Israel and therefore impacted Hashem. He kind of plays on that note. I didn't get all through the whole thing, but what we learned from here is, the reason why I like to give this Torah over to Jerusalem Dalet is because the Zera Shimshon here gives a very nice explanation as to why there was a relationship between the person, the ruler, and the nation that they take revenge on. So examples are Moshe and Midian, Yoshua and Amalek, David and Moab, etc., etc. The idea is that similar to a Tashmish Kedusha, an article that's holding something kadosh, like an Aron Kodesh, like a tefillin bag, things like that, there's holding them, and therefore, as long as that bag is being used for something holy, that bag contains holiness. And even after the bag leaves, after the tefillin are taken out, and the bag is falling apart, the bag still has some sort of level of kedusha, but it's not as much as the previous, and therefore he makes a whole. The way I see it, at least, and I understand what the Zera Shimshon is saying is that he's trying to do is saying is that the person, someone who came from that nation, is the only person who can take revenge because they know how to take revenge on it properly. Because they were the ones who grew up there, so they kind of understand what's going on, and B, I think also is because as long as they're holding and maintaining that kedusha they're holding that rule, that person in their nation, that nation is considered has some sort of level of kedusha in it, and therefore they still retain that level of tashmish kedusha. Once that tashmish kedusha, once that holy spirit, whatever it may be, whether it's the Moshe, whether it's David, whether Ruth and Moab, Ruth and Naamah, whoever it may be, as soon as they come out of that nation and we have that beautiful story, then they can say, okay, now the nation is open for attack and open for battle. And every time you through Tanakh, you'll see that there's some sort of relationship.
Well, you're talking that our leaders will be sparks that will find their enemies and
yes.
take
One
action.
of the things I heard from Chabadniks is that they're very strong in translating Italian to every language.
I'm just going to pause it for a second.
And that is partly the avoda, that they want to transform the sparks of, say, the nations that they're in. By translating the language, so Italian and Arabic, for example, that was a big thing, there's a whole story about it. But having Arabic in Macneas and the fact that they printed inside of the during the war. Yeah. And I know people here in fact, like Dr. Newman and Harry. I printed a holy sefer in such a place. It's machnia. It subdues their power and gives ability for us to like you said, like with the Gerim or to machnia, to be matzliach over them, to have victory over there.
Okay.
By the way, Mordecai,
Yes.
Yehudi,
Right.
he was Yemini,
Right.
Shaul,
Yeah.
and Amalek.
Right.
It's also that.
You didn't bring that example. That's a good one. All right, we'll do one more short one.
I just want to shout out Mordecai, who's throughout this whole time period since Charles, we sent him only blessings, Shaul ben Rachel blessings. since he's left, and hopefully will return shortly. But Mordecai has literally held the fort. He's kept up Shirim, Dov stood in one time, and on Shabbat we have all the different rotation of speakers. We're doing an amazing job, and we're trying to fill in that space. It's not an easy space to fill. And the fact that people are still coming to the shir and keeping it going, and now we have the family minyan, the shtibel, giving us a place to do the shir is a tremendous opportunity to grow this, keep it growing, so that when Charles does come back, we'll be happy to have a full.
Okay, so let's.
He's in the house.
Okay, so in this, we're going to do a short one, which is hold on one second here. So in Parshat Masei, we have several. There's so many. Okay, so we're going to do Drush Bet in Parshat Masei. Parshat Masei is the most famous part of Parshat Masei. Is obviously the 42 different journeys, pit stops the Bnei Israel take, and there are many midrashim and many divrei Torah as to why 42, the different journeys. What does that mean? That each person should take a little bit of a.
42 is the number.
Of Yud of one of the Neshimot of Hashem.
No, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, really?
No, you guys know this? Oh, the meaning of that was very. I have to look this up.
Okay. Anyway, so the first pasuk in Parshat Masei says, "Vayichtov Moshe et motzaihem lemaseihem al pi Hashem, ve'ela maseihem lemotzaihem." So if you look at the pasuk, it says Moshe writes down the goings. Motzaihem is where they're going. Lemaseihem to their journeys. Al pi Hashem, based on what Hashem said. Ve'ela maseihem lemotzaihem, and these are their journeys to where they go. So obviously, if you read what I just repeated, obviously it sounds like it's repeating itself, and that's what he's going to ask. This is a famous question. Zera Shimshon is not the first one to ask it. He asked the question, Mawa Kefa, why does it say Motzayem L'Masayem twice in the same pasuk? And why in the beginning it says Motzayem L'Masayem, and in the second one it says Masayem L'Motzayem? It reverses the order, right? So it's two questions. Again, these questions are not uncommon. You can almost every Rav and Sefer has this question about the parsha. So, what? We have a million? Okay. Okay. So he says like this. So he says. The Zera Shimshon says, he starts his answer by saying is that based on the Sefer, on the Zohar and the Megillah Mukot, he says, so every one of these journeys, they did is they were kind of weakening the negative forces that were going on in the Midbar. The Midbar, as we know, is a Makom Nachash, Saraf Ve'akrav Tzimon. That's based on Dvarim. So Itziu Bilam Mipihem Ushotziu Misham Kol Nitzotzot Kedoshot Ve'elu Hayu Zochim Hayu Motziim Otam Nitzotzot Bizman Mu'at Lefi Shechatu U'Tzechu Litakev Sham Zman Arbeh. So he says is that basically is every place that Bnei Israel stopped, their job was to take out the kedusha, right? And they actually, if you look in, I think the Tomer Dvorah, the Ramak, says that when a person goes to Galut, he should go to Galut. The person actually should go out of his comfort zone in certain places, and his job to do there is actually to do just as, to take the nitzotzot of kedusha out of the place that he goes to. So sometimes you say, like, what am I doing in this place? There's a job and you have a role for it, and you have to just make sure that you find the elevated, whether it's elevating the people or elevating the person or yourself or something like that. You have to kind of elevate yourself from there. So that's kind of what he's saying here. And then he says, now we understand that, and he says, based on the amount of time that they spent, Bnei Israel spent in each place, their job, the kedusha, they have to find. Sometimes it took more time, sometimes it took less time to kind of get out this kedusha that was coming.
Sometimes I have to go backtrack.
Right, backtrack. Exactly. He's going to mention that. Does he mention here? No, he doesn't mention here. There's another. The previous Torah he mentioned that. Now he says, "Klomar shemilat motza'ehem rotza lomar yitzia u'mitzia." Right, motza'ehem has, you can explain it in two different ways. Motza'ehem literally means where they left, right? Where they're going out.
Like you have a starting point.
Right. So motzah is where do you start from? Nekudat motzah, and then you also have motzah milashon mitzia, where I find something, right? So he's saying is, I found the Kedusha from that place. I left the place because I found the spark of holiness that needed to be there. Right, Mitzvah. So he says, look what he says. Now you have to say is, what is, and now in order to make that relationship any good darshan, what does he have to do? He has to find a pasuk or a place in the Gemara that mentions that kind of thing, because otherwise you can't just pull that stuff out of nowhere. So he says, and he finds, look what he says. He says, K'moshe Pershu al Chaim Lahem Lemotzeim. If you look in Masechet Eruvin, Daf Nun Daled Amud Aleph, it says, when the pasuk says, in Ishlei Chaim Hem Lemotzeihem Lemotziam Bapeh. The person, what is it? What is Chaim? The Chaim here we're talking about Torah. What is the Torah? In order to take it out, right? To take it out loud. In order for you, the Torah, to really be Mitkayim and you, and for it to become a source of life for you, you actually have to take the Torah and express it. You can't just read Torah. You can't just read and learn and then you say it's good. Right? You have to talk it out. And then he says, same thing here is, how does the Torah become something of you? How do you take it out and make it real? You say it, right? So he's saying the same thing. Motzaihem, the motziam bapeh, is I take it out, I take something out. So that's how he makes the relationship. Then he says, you know what? Even if you don't like my Jewish from the Gemara, he says, let's just say you don't like it. He says, even if I just use the word Yetziah, as the word Motzai, from Lashon Yetziah, meaning leaving, binyan hufal. He says it means hufal is that hayinu hanitzotzut shehutzum me'otan hamikomot hayu muchanim sham miyad u'mamtinim u'masaot. He says each place Hashem set it up. Again, he's going to set up in a very good, very important caveat in a second. But he says is Hashem made them go through. He wanted them to go through the journeys of the Midbar, right? The goal. What was the goal? To leave Mitzrayim and to get to where? Eretz Yisrael, right? In the ideal world, Hashem would go through these he would take Bnei Yisrael through these 42 stops, stop, pull out the Kedusha out of each place, and he says is that, Zera Shimshon says, is that each place was waiting, the Kedusha was waiting, they just had to do, pluck it and move on, right? So it would be just like, rush through and get to Eretz Yisrael, right? Exactly, Havdil, exactly, just has to, so,
They serve like the entire map of Israel.
Right.
Right. It's just amazing. We're like fixing up, like not just people, places, and time. Like
right.
This is fluid time as well.
So he says, in the ideal scenario, what was supposed to happen is Bnei Israel would just basically do like the person I was learning with the other day. He said it would be like Mario Brothers or Donkey Kong. Just have you have to pick up the thing and just move on to the next level, right? Right, exactly. Mushrooms, exactly. So he says, right. Anyway, so he says, Im Tomarkin, what do we have to do with that? So then, literally, these places, these journeys, were waiting for Bnei Israel to go from one point to the next. He says, so if so, then what would we say about these places? Then he says, great question. He says, then we have a problem. What's the problem? He says, he says the problem is that Bnei Israel would never have time to rest. Because they would just, they just go from stop to stop. Remember, you have 6 million people going from point A to point B. So when the leader of point A gets to point B, the back of the pack is still haven't stopped it, right? So
like an average of 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years every time they move. Because in the beginning it was like 16.
I don't know the averages, but let's just. He says we don't have a place right. So he says, "Arei miyachi agilu makom, you look timakol umiyad ayalem l'sad makom acher b'li menucha." So he says. Just from a practical perspective, he says, is as soon as you get to point A, if the Kedusha was waiting for them to go, then all they have to do is just, go to point A or go to point B, pick up the thing, and then move on. So they'd never have a point to stop. They'd just get tired and they'd get worn out, right? And he said, therefore it says, Vayichtov Moshe et motzaihem, shayu mamtinim et hamasot va'izrehu l'maseihem. Moshe wrote down the motzaihem. That's why Moshe wrote down their goings out where they were leaving, and indeed, when they get to the point where they were always ready and waiting for the journey, meaning that Maseihem is that when it says the Maseihem is that they were ready to travel for the next destination, even if it means that they just go somewhere, pick something up, and move on. Meaning it wasn't that it was showing the excitement of Bnei Israel, saying this is Al Pi Hashem. Whatever Hashem tells us to do, He tells us to wait a day, takes 3 days, 7 days, whatever, Al Pi Hashem. Right, exactly. So he says here, Klomar. Bnei Israel were not bothered by the fact that they were going to journey back and forth or whatever, as long as it takes, because they said it's Al Pi Hashem. Now, this is if you.
Wasn't it a punishment?
Hold on, we're going to get to that. Very good. Klamar she'elchu masala masa Al Pi Hashem. Right, they're going to go from point A to point B Al Pi Hashem. Hashem gives them a promise in Parshat, in the beginning of Shemot, in the middle of Shemot, I'm going to carry you like the wings of eagles. Right? It's going to be easy. It's going to be smooth riding. Because Bnei Yisrael are going to be like, no problem, whatever you want, Hashem. Right? This is all, right? V'lo yisbelu Torah klal. There's going to be no suffering at all. You think that they're going to suffer because you go from point A to point B and they never have time to rest. Right? This is all the ideal scenario. Right? Again, we have to remember the ideal scenario was they leave Mitzrayim, they do these 42 things quickly, Hashem sets it all up, they just go, take out what they need, and move on to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so 11 days. So even if it's 11 days, right? The scenario would have been 11 days. Right. Right. From Mitzrayim to Har Sinai. Right. Exactly. Now, exactly that. Now he says, "Kol zot."
There was another like sin in this parsha, right?
There's no sin. No sin in part.
Maybe I misunderstood something. Wasn't it something about how they were told like not like someone told them like not to go to Israel? Like that.
Oh, in this week's parsha. Oh no. In this week's parsha, you're mentioning something. In this week's next week is it this week? No, it's next week's parsha. In next week's parsha, what? Chushim, I think Husham ben Dan. You're right. But next week's parsha, Moshe starts begins retelling the story of recaps the whole in Dvarim. Moshe recaps the whole what happened to him. He gives this whole speech, whatever. And the first thing he says is that we're stuck in this midbar because the first generation of people didn't believe that Hashem could provide everything for us, and therefore, and then when they sin, and when we caused this to sin, what do we do? What's the next thing? If you look at the Meraglim, what's the next thing that happens after the Meraglim? The next thing. They try to go up. Exactly, they try to go up, and Moshe says, "Are you guys stupid? Like, what's going on? You don't realize that Hashem? It's not like, oh, I'm sorry, we're just going to go up and start again. This was a real big deal. So that was the sin. Maybe that's the one you're talking about." Sure. Right. So exactly, like you said, even if you said from Mitzrayim, it takes 11 days. Let's say it takes 11 days. So the 11 days, if you were to go through 11 days, so that would have been the ideal scenario. And then he finishes off, he says, Aval achar shechatu, after they sin, and various sins. One is chet meraglim, which obviously is the big one. Then you have chet, all the different chataim, Midian, and everything else. He says, and that's why the pasuk then goes, first part goes, ve'ele. It says, "Vayichtov Moshe et motzeihem l'maseim al pi Hashem kama." Right? If you read it like that, what he's saying is, had it been al pi Hashem, had they done the way it's supposed to be, the motzeihem is first what they found, and then they do the journey. Meaning they pick up something and then they go on a journey. Al pi Hashem, everything is al pi Hashem, and there's no problem. But because they sinned, then Moshe switches the order and he says, "Ela maseim l'motzeihem," because now every piece of the journey is now they have to work hard. Now they have to really work and toil. It says here, Masot hayu mamtinim. They have to wait. They have to literally go there and wait and figure it out and figure out what's the nitzos, they have to start working, figuring out what do we have to learn or what do we have to take out of this place. And then he says, meaning because Bnei Israel, yes, in an ideal scenario, Bnei Israel would have said, whatever Hashem tells us to do, we'll do. Right? But every time, if you look at the 42 Matot, many of them were places where Bnei Israel either complained, had something to say, rebelled, did something.
He talks about the list.
Right.
The names.
Right. So he's saying, he says basically is that in every place that they went, it would take every place, instead of saying is, yes, whatever Hashem tells me to do, that's what I'm going to do. He says, no, that's the, Bnei Israel were kind of like pushing back. And because they pushed back and because of their sins, so Moshe switches the order in the same pasuk to teach them a lesson, saying is, now you have to go find it for yourself. Hashem was really just going to give it to you. He was literally going to give you the places and you just have to go around and around. So in the book, that there's the Nachman Seltzer book that takes each. It's called, what is it called? Yeah, but it's not in English. There's something in English. There's a name for it. No, something like that. I forgot what it's called already. Beyond the Segula or something like that.
He put out a new one in Tehillim.
Yeah, so he has in one of the Sfarim he takes this drush and he gives a story about a person who he says that if I know that he takes the idea, it's like the Zera Shimshon is really saying is that we have a responsibility to, if you know that Hashem is in control, then you follow Hashem's commandments no matter what. I mean, the idea is that I'll be Hashem and that's it. Like there's no questions. So he gives a story of a person who was moved. He lived in the early 1900s, Oh, sorry. It goes backwards. It starts with his children, or I think it's his grandchildren already, I think was the story. His grandchildren, they grew up in South Africa, and then they moved to Israel. And then when they moved out of South Africa, they decided that it's time to move the grandparents' body to Israel as well. And they moved them to the cemetery in Sanhedria. And so a couple of days after they were there, the woman who, I think it's the daughter or the granddaughter, I don't remember, sees this person. He looks familiar, she couldn't place him. And she goes to the person. She says, "I know you're from somewhere, but where is it?" She goes, "I was the person who was responsible. I'm the Chevra Kadisha." And he says, "I was the person responsible for reburying your, I think, father or grandfather, whatever it was." And he says, "I want to tell you something. Your grandfather or father was a special person. Why? Because even after so many months, whatever it was, the body was still whole. That's very rare." And he said that he must have done something very special. And then the story goes back, and he says that when his father, that is the person who was buried, his father moved to South Africa in the early 1900s or 1910s and 20s, he was running a business, a coal business, to provide coal for heat for the various people in South Africa. And then his son came from Europe to take over the business. And the son, after taking over the business, said, "I'm not delivering coal on Shabbat. I'm not doing it." And the customers kept on complaining, saying, "No, you have to, And he said, "Nope. I'll do whatever you want. I'll give you extra coal on Friday. I'll give you extra coal on Sunday. I don't care. I'm not doing a Shabbat." And over the course, even though the father told him, "No, you can't. I built the business. You can't take over you can't destroy my business like that." The son said, "No, I'm doing it. I'm going to commit to it, whatever it was." And over the course of time, he becomes more and more well known for his trust and his integrity, for holding to stick to his guns. So the story ends by saying, this is why, in some way that he was committed, so committed, strong, that knowing that Hashem told us to keep Shabbat, and that is really what he's saying is, I'm not going to bend on what Hashem tells me to do. And in other words, the idea is that when we see something and we're strong to what Hashem tells us and we're committed to it, then we can we get the reward that the reward is there. And I can give you a story of my own about Shabbat. A couple of weeks ago, I was coaching the Little League team in a tournament, and we didn't think that we were going to get to this level. We got to the level. Honestly, we didn't think we were. Thank you. So we get to the level of the playoff round, and one of the baseball. So one of the playoff.
Baseballs?
No, baseball. No. So he said to the base. When we get to the tournament. As we get to the tournament, the first week of the tournament, there was no games on Shabbat. The second week, the playoffs game, the semifinal game was on Shabbat. And most of the people on the team were from, but not everyone was. Two of the coaches were, and one of the coaches was not. And the two coaches that were said, "We're not playing on Shabbat." And then we asked the parents, because they're under 12, under bar mitzvah, so we could easily kind of maybe whatever. So we said, "You know what?" We asked the parents, and most parents said, "We're not playing on Shabbat." So then we had to approach the organization that was playing, and we said, "Listen, we're not playing on Shabbat. We're not going to do it." They said, "Well, let's get to when it gets relevant." And we'll talk about when they kept on pushing us off. On Wednesday, we realized that we're making the quarterfinals, and we said, "Listen, if we can't play the semifinals, why should we play the quarterfinals?" Right? Because in other words, if we win the quarterfinals and the semifinals are on Shabbat, we're not going to play. So then why should we even play the quarterfinals? Right? And then we told them why don't we do this? The quarterfinals are meant to be played on Friday. Why don't we play a second Friday, because Shabbat is very late there. Let's play a second game, and that's to our disadvantage. And we told them this on Wednesday afternoon, and we said, we are not playing on Shabbat. That's what we said. We said, we're not doing it. We'd rather forfeit our game, the quarterfinals, and then play on Shabbat. So at first they thought we were kidding. They really did. Honestly, they thought that we did. And then we said, we're not doing it. We have our 9 to play, at least 9. Most of the time they want 10 or 11. So they said, fine. Well, unfortunately, we lost the second game, but at least the point was that we were committed. We stuck to it. Stuck to it. Right. And Baruch Adonai Olam, Amen ve'Amen. Thank you very much. There's a minute?
Yes.
Oh, great. This way. Yikadal v'yikadash shmei rabba v'amad v'achirutei v'amlich lachutei v'yatzmach kol kanei v'karev meshichei v'chai yechon v'yamichon v'chai l'chol beit Yisrael ba'agala v'zman karib v'imru amen v'yehei shmei rabba v'barach v'olam l'omei omaya yiparach v'yishtabach v'yitalel v'yitalal shmei l'kudusha b'richu l'eila mikol chmata damiram be'alma v'imru amen al Yisrael v'al rabbanat l'midei talmidei on v'al kol man de'askim v'al right adi v'achar kadisha adein v'di b'chol אתר ואתר. יהי לא נכון שלום רבה חינה וחיסטה ורחמים וחיים אריכם וזון רביכי ופרגנה מקדם ובנשמיה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבה משמיה וחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום ברמה והוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.